Hey guys, how's it going? I'm going to show you how to set up and get running a basic project on a TMS320C6713 DSP Starter Kit. The DSK is what you can say. So the processor itself, the chip, the IC that's doing all the hard work is the TMS320C6713. And this is made by Texas Instruments. And so the digital starter kit, or the DSP starter kit, the DSK for short, is meant to help you get up and running with it quickly. It's a very old kit. I think from 2004, 2005, maybe even earlier. That's from what I found. And so it's still lived through the ages. And so I haven't found something that's really up to date on how to install it. And so I provided this to hopefully help you guys. It's very useful for student, learning with a basic digital signal processing class. It's very useful just to play around with audio and different filters and stuff like that. All right, so I figured I'd show you a little bit about the container that it comes in. So it comes in a really big box that I'm not going to be able to show you. And so the first thing you'll notice is that it comes with a CD. I recommend not using this at all. For one, on the CD, it's dated at 2005. And that's extremely old. The IDE that it's using is Code Composer Studio. This version is 3.1 and they're currently on 7.3. And so you can see how old this is because this doesn't even support Windows 7 and above. There's really not a huge use for this. There's some documentation and some support files that I've extracted and reorganized and kind of set up to make sure that it'll work. So I would recommend using that, and that'll be in the link below the video. You'll have your board that's right here. It'll come with a barrel jack connection to power the board, and it'll also come with a USB connection. And there's a technical reference manual and a getting started guide on here that I would not recommend following. I'd recommend following what I have because it is very outdated. So let me go over the basics of kind of what's on this board, and this is also in the documentation, but it's always good to go over. So you have a reset button right here. This nice push button, 5-volt barrel jack. This is what powers it, and this is the USB connection to program it, and also to interface. You can communicate with it like via UART. Here's your actual processor itself, and here's your 4 audio connections, your audio jacks. So you have 2 outputs right here. This one's for headphones, and this one's for speakers. It's a line out. And then here's line in, and this is mic in. And then you also have flash. One of these chips is for flash. You have one of these chips for external memory interfacing. And here's your basic switches for setting up how you want it to boot. You can make it boot from the flash. You can make it boot from your computer via the USB connection. And typically you can leave all 4 of these in the default state being off, but they are there if you need to change it. Right here are your user switches, and these are not push switches. These are ones that stay down. There's 4 and it goes 0 to 3. And so when they click down, I don't have fingernails, so I have to use a pen to bring them back up, but that's how that works. And here's 4 LEDs, 0, 1 through 3, that you can flash on and off just to show what's going on, or use them however you need. And yeah, so that's kind of a basic overview of how this board is laid out. All right, so starting out, we're going to work on getting the software and everything set up on your computer because that is the more difficult part. And so yeah, we'll start with that. So come to this link, and this link will be provided in the description below. And you will come down and download the installer for your OS. And so I'm going to do it on Windows. That's the only one I've done it on, but I'm sure the process is fairly similar. And I'm going to use the online installer. So you'll let it download, go ahead and run it, and it will begin. And so it's setting up right now, and it also does some checks. So I know one of the checks that it does is the checks for antivirus, and if you haven't enabled, it may have some issues installing, so you might want to check into just disabling that temporarily. So you're going to come over here and accept the license agreement. You'll select your install folder. Typically this is okay to where the default is. I'm actually going to use D just because my D drive is my hard disk and not my SSD. And now it's going to ask what processor are you wanting to support? So we have the 6713, and so the family is the C6000. So we come down here to C6000 and we select it. If you have other ones you want to select, you can, but this is the one that we will need. All right, so now here's another tricky part that it actually took me a little bit of testing to find out. So the drivers for communicating with the DSK are in this right here. So this, upon first reading this, you're like, okay, this is debug stuff. Do I really need to debug? Um, and it doesn't mention, well, I guess it does right there mention drivers, but you do need this no matter what. So you have to check this for Spectrum Digital because that's going to provide the drivers to communicate with it. So select that and then click Finish. Now it's asking if I want to go past the firewall, and I'll click Allow. Depending on your UAC settings, you may or may not have that. And now it's going to go and actually install the Code Composer Studio. And this is all very customary. Nothing should go wrong. I didn't receive any errors when I was doing this. Okay, so this is the screen that you will see after the installation is done. I mean, it's up to you if you want to make the shortcuts, but at the very least, it's good to start Code Composer. So go ahead and start it, let it install, and there's a couple of steps that we still need to do. So this will pop up every time, but the question is do you want to set this as the default? So in my case, and probably everybody else's case, you do want to set it as the default and make this your workspace. You can make it some other directory, but you probably want to make it the default. Otherwise, it will every time you start up Code Composer Studio. So you probably, when you first start, you will see this menu right here. And so the first thing you want to do is you want to go to Help section and check for updates. And so in this case, there was no updates found, which is fine. When I was doing this the first time, there were updates, and so it was necessary to do that. And then we will go to View and CCS App Center. So this is kind of nice. It's an easy way. It's kind of like the App Store on Apple. An easy way to download the things that you need. So here's our compiler. So the C6000 compiler. TI makes a bunch of different. I don't know what these are right here. I'm assuming that the Node.js may be used by Code Composer Studio. But there's a bunch of, TI makes a bunch of different processors, and so they have a bunch of different compilers because there's different families. And so instead of having you go somewhere and download it, you can just get it from this App Center. In our case, we want to select the V7 compiler, and it has to be V7. Don't use anything above V7 like V8, or if in the future they do a V9, because it was in V8 it is deprecated, or it's obsolete that you cannot use the 6713. It's just not supported, so you need the V7 compiler. Yep, that should be the only thing that needs to be downloaded. So once you select it, you can come up here and click Install Software. You'll accept the terms of agreement, and it'll go through and download. And it'll need to restart Code Composer Studio, so go ahead and do it. And now an install screen has popped up, and it's going to finish the actual installation. Okay, so here's Code Composer Studio, and this is the basics to getting everything up and running installation-wise. Okay, so let's work on getting getting a project set up in Code Composer Studio. The first thing that you want to do is there are going to be some board support. There's going to be libraries that you're going to need and documentation and stuff like that. And so I have a zip file attached in the description below, a link for it that you can download. And you can extract it, and these are the 4 folders that come with it. I will go through just basics of what is in each folder, some good things to note. So let's go through the docs. This extra are some things that you may want to use, but probably not. These are the things that you will most definitely use, or they're up to date and useful and valid information. So the first thing is right here, this CHM compiled help file. You can double click it, and this is information that TI has given to you, and it's just a help file. Some of it's outdated because of how old the Code Composer Studio is, so you'll have to take it with just take it as it is. It gives you feature information. Really, where it's useful is not this one, but in the BSL API index right here, you can see a list of all their functions, and this is extremely helpful because you know what functions to use. You can get a description. It gives you an example, what parameters are needed, what it returns, stuff like that. Required libraries, required headers, very useful information. So dip switch, these are the switch. So you can see for switch information, you can see there's an init function. So you have to initialize it, but then after you initialize it, the function get. So you can see the header required is dip.h, DSK6713 underscore dip.h, and then the prototype for it is you call DSK6713 underscore dip underscore get, and then dip number. And so it's from 0 to 3, so it's not 1 indexed, 0 indexed, and it'll return 1 if it's depressed or on, and 0 if it's off. So this is this is useful information. So yeah, I've mostly used it for the API reference. Don't know if it's very useful for anything besides that. Here's the data sheet for the audio codec if you ever wanted to look through that. Yep, so there's that. I won't go through that really. Oh, I'm sorry. I misread. This is for the audio codec. This is for the processor itself. So yeah, the AIC23 is the audio codec. The C6713 is your processor. What is this for? Oh, this is the flash memory datasheet. Here's the Verilog for the digital starter kit in VHDL. Here's the technical reference manual. This is what they give you in the kit, but now it's in a PDF. So you really don't need the booklet that comes with it, but you're welcome to use whatever makes you happy. And then here's the schematic. So this is exactly, a full schematic of how everything's set up and all that, which is very nice. Very nice of them to do that you can see what's going on. All right, so there's the docs folder. Let's go ahead and go through include. I'm not going to go too crazy into it, but this include is going to be used by your project. So this is why it's given to you, is because you'll have to put it somewhere so that it can be found. These are kind of like the highest level libraries right here. These are the ones that you'll be using. And all of this uses the CSL libraries. So yeah, so these 5 files are built on top of that. So you have to include both libraries, but these are the ones you'll typically be including and using. Although you can go low level and use this. All right, so there's include. Lib, kind of the same. So here's the CSL library. This is for the 6713. So if you were to just buy that processor, you would probably use the CSL 6713 libraries, but you wouldn't be using that because the board support libraries, or the DSK 6713 is only for the DSP Starter Kit. And so you have both of these libraries. Well, you only use this top one. I include the bottom one just in case. And then you have this, which is for those other 5 header files. So this is the actual source code. Those header files just give you the declarations telling you what it is. And these you won't necessarily be using. Composer Studio will use them, but you won't actually be using them to reference them like you would the docs. Now source, this is entirely for you. If you want to see exactly how something is done, this is the DSK 6713. These are all the functions. So let me give you an example of the dip. You remember there was the init. So init actually does nothing. And then dip get, and you give the dip number. It does a basic check to see that it's within 0 and 3, and then it actually reads it, and it just reads it from a register. So that's I mean that's really nice that they gave that as well, because there has been times where it's been nice to look through it. So you have all of these just provided for you because those are built into the libs, and that's how Code Composer Studio will use them. Okay, so there's a basic review of how that works, and so now let's actually create a project and get going. Go ahead and start Code Composer Studio. It'll come up to Getting Started. What you'll do is you'll go File, New, CCS Project. And this just skips a menu, so I can hit Cancel. And if I go to File, New, Project, I'm just going to go to Code Composer Studio and CCS Project. So you're just skipping a step. There's really no need to do the other thing. This is built on top of Eclipse, so that's why the first thing's provided. So now we need to set everything up for our project. So in this right here, this one to the left, this box is a filter to help you select this, because you can see there is a lot to select from. Let's expand this and select C671X. And then when you do that, you see there's just 3 options. Ours is the 6713, and we're good. Now, what we'll do is we'll select the connection, and we'll go down to Spectrum Digital DSK-EVM-EZ DSP onboard USB emulator. And that's a mouthful, but that comes with the drivers. So whenever you select the drivers like we did on the installation page, this will come with it. Select a project name. So let's just do, we'll name it Hello World, which is every basic project name. You're going to do your compiler. This is this version 7 we downloaded from the App Center. And you can see everything looks fine. The advanced settings are okay. There's no changes that need to be made there. And we can just do an empty project with main C. And we will hit finish, and that will create the project. Okay, so as you can see, a basic project was made. Now, this next step is going to be a one-time thing. So just do it once. If you've done it once, then you're good. So the first thing is you want to go to these folders, and we want our include and our lib. So get those and copy them. So I will right-click, copy. Next, we need to go to where TI installed Code Composer Studio. So to go back, remember it was in C, TI is the default. I changed it to D. And we're going to go to CCS V7. So Code Composer Studio V7. Tools, sorry, I'm trying to read the tools compiler C6000. So this is what we installed from the App Center. We double click that, and you can see there's an include in our lib. So right now we're going to paste, and what it'll do is it'll bring in our include and libs. So I already pasted, and if I go into include, you will see that the CSL stuff is there, and the DSK stuff will be there as well. You can see it right there. So that's a one-time thing. Once you import it, you're good to go, and creating a project will be a lot easier. So you have that done. Okay, we have that done. So now let's go back to Code Composer Studio, collapse this, or expand, sorry, the other way around, and we're going to set a default target configuration. So this probably just needs to be done once, and what it does is it kind of it's a basic configuration on how to upload your information to the target. If you double click it, it'll open this menu, and you can see that the correct board's already selected and everything's okay. So now if you have this, you just need to set it as active, so that way it will be the active target configuration. So when you go to debug, it knows to run this configuration file. So there, that's a one-time thing, I believe. I don't think you have to keep doing it. If you do, it's not a big deal. You can just right-click and select it. Okay, so now we're back to this next part is going to be in every project you create. You have to do this every time, so there's no more one-time stuff. So what we'll do is we will right-click Hello World, and we'll do Show Build Settings. And you want to go to the C6000 compiler, or no, the C6000 linker, I'm sorry, and the file search path. So if you have done C++ programming before, since we don't have to, it already knows where the include files are because we put include in there into the compiler path. But now we have to actually tell them what libraries we want to link. And so the libc comes with it, but we need to add two more. The first one is going to be DSK6713BSL.lib. So BSL stands for Board Support Library. These are the DSK6713 functions that were seen in the help library. That's the first one that needs to be linked. The second one is the CSL 6713.lib. So CSL probably stands for Chip Support Library. So as I was saying, chip support libraries, if you just get the chip alone, but with the DSK, you get the board support library that goes on top of it. That's a higher level, easier to use. So if you add both of these are the two libraries that you need to use the functions provided for you. You have to go to release. If you do plan on releasing this, you're going to want to do the same thing. So you go to release configuration, go to file search path, and add the same two again. Because if you switch releases and you have issues, this is probably why, and you will need to. Oops. You'll probably be having errors and kind of wondering why. So it's good to do them both at once and just to get them over with. So now that you have both of these done, so if we go back to debug, should be right down here, press OK. Now you should be able to build, debug, or release, and you'll be good to go. Okay, so now that's all fine. We are ready for our project. Now we can just start programming. And I'm going to just write this all from scratch to show you what I had to do. But typically you can just use a template and copy and paste the code that you need. So the first thing is you need to define what chip you're going to use. This will be required. So you just define it in main and leave it alone. And then you need to include the files. So the first one is DSK6713.h. And then any other functions that you're going to use have other header files. So there's 5 header files for the DSK6713. We're only using 2 of those, or 3 of those, I guess technically. If you use other ones, then I guess we don't need the flash. I'm sorry. Then if you use other ones, you just include them like normal. You have the library included, so you won't have to do any extra steps. So we included that. I included the LED and the base DSK6713 headers, because this example right here is just going to blink an LED on and off at a rate of 1 hertz, I believe. So in main, the first thing you always have to do is you have to initialize for the DSK6713, and then in our case, we want to also do it for the LEDs. And they don't take any parameters, you just got to initialize them, and then we will start a loop, an infinite loop. So while true, since this is C, you can't use lowercase true, it has to be all uppercase, which is a macro for 1. And now what we'll do is we will toggle the LED, the second LED, or actually the third because it's 0 indexed, and then we'll wait a second. So I guess technically this is a rate of half a hertz because it's 1 second on, 1 second off. So yeah, it's 1/2, which is half a hertz. So what we're doing is, I forgot the wait. So what it does is it toggles the second LED, and then it waits 1,000,000 microseconds, which is the same as a second. And all these functions, the best way to know which ones or what are available and how to use them is to use the help compiled help library that I showed you earlier in the docs section. And so right here, with this code, this will blink an LED at a rate of half a hertz, or it'll be on for 1 second and off for a second. All right, so now this next step is you're going to be doing the hardware part, which is not very difficult. Plug in the barrel jack connection, the 5-volt connection, just plug it in to the board, and also plug in the USB and connect it to your computer. The driver should already be installed and it should be recognized. Once that happens, you're going to want to wait a second and watch those 4 LEDs on the board. It'll start out with just the second LED, or the first LED, or the second LED, but it's labeled number 1, will be set, and then that's a post setup and test, and it will then go through a test, and when it's finished, all four of them will be solid. And that's when you can actually program it. So once that's ready, you will come up here, come into your computer, and you'll click your hammer icon to build it. And you can see it's building the project. This may take a second because this is the first time, so it's never been used before, and everything's being built from scratch. Okay, so after building, I actually received an error about an invalid instruction scheme. So I played around and the build icon again, and it worked. So if you receive an error saying invalid instruction scheme, mine was because of arc cosine function in the RTL 6700 lib. Try doing this. Try building again. So once that happens, if it builds correctly, you'll see there's some warnings over here. Those are fine, but as long as there's no errors, you're good to go. And your board is plugged in. So the last thing to do is, okay, so this is how I debug. So you'll right click right here on the project that you want, and then you click debug as and code composer debug session. It'll change this whole view into what's known as a debug view. So it's going to bring in breakpoints and some of your variables that you want to watch. It'll show your code right here in the middle, and then it also tells you kind of what's happening with the current thread in process. It takes a little second whenever first setting up this debug session to get everything set up because it has to enumerate the USB device, but after that it's pretty fast. So whenever that starts, in this menu you can see that right here is your connection with your TI board, and you can see it's suspended for a software breakpoint. And that is because whenever you first start, it's going to stop you at the beginning of main, and it just does that automatically. That way you can start it and run it on whenever you want. So now you come up here and you click run. So, or resume, I guess is what it technically is. But you'll come up here and resume the project that we created, and it should run. And right there on my board, the second LED is blinking at a rate of about a hertz. Okay, so let me give you some more tips on how to make, I guess, life a little bit easier. So right here you can hit pause, and it'll pause the program running. And you'll come up here and you can click main. Right here you can click main.c and you can edit the code. If you want to make small changes, I really recommend this. So in our case, let's make the third LED or the fourth LED blink. And so we have that right there. You have to come and click build again. That's the key. Once you click build, it'll build and it'll say, do you want to reload this file? And you do. And once that's done, now you'll click run or resume again. And now the fourth LED is blinking in my case. So the key thing to note is you can suspend it at any time and make some changes and re-upload if you want. You can also set breakpoints. So to set breakpoints, you can right click, breakpoint, breakpoint. And you'll see one was set. There's hotkeys for all this stuff. This interface is pretty good for showing you what the values are for everything, any variable values and stuff like that. So it's really good for that. And so this has been a basic installation, getting everything started. If you have any questions or comments, leave them in the comments below. Thank you.